When you give something, you should think, if that act of giving has deleterious consequences, if it actually hurts the people you're giving to, well, then the moral value of giving is sometimes put into question. We have to understand that our intention of wanting to help someone and even doing something doesn't actually mean that those people will be helped.
I could write a best-selling book on all the stupid things I've done out of good intentions, where I thought I was helping the poor and I was actually making the problem worse.
It's in relationships where people love one another and care for one another, where they are respectful of each other enough and trust each other enough that they can engage in constructive criticism, mutual accountability and support. That's when real change happens in communities. It's face-to-face compassion, or de Tocqueville called it face-to-face charity.
What's most difficult about loving the poor and reaching the poor is that in order to be effective, it means that we're going to have to get very personally involved for a long period of time. We're going to be challenged. We're going to experience a great amount of pain. That's why I'm grateful that Jesus had dealt with so much suffering, because we are going to suffer when we try to effectively love somebody. Solutions that we lob over, like a Scud missile or something where we do drive-by ministry and help somebody for a minute, those are not going to be very effective. They're not going to deal with the root issues.
In the 1960s, when Christians got on the bandwagon of government interventionist policies, it seemed as though they would make a grand difference. It took us until the 80s to realize what happens, especially in urban areas, and how they are devastated by that level of economic intervention.
If politics and money were the remedies, then Washington should be the most progressive, the safest, the best educated population. We in Washington today lead the nation in 21 separate categories of poverty expenditures. Explain to me why a child born in Washington, D.C. has a life expectancy that's lower than a child born anywhere in the Western Hemisphere, second only to Haiti. We have the highest per capita expenditure on education, and we're 48th in outcomes for kids.
In January 9th, 1996, the New York Times Magazine, a very relatively liberal publication, on their front cover, their cover story, dealt with that very question of programs that the state had initiated in an attempt to alleviate poverty. Urban Renewal in 1949, Community Action Program in 1964, Model Cities in 1966, Community Development Block Grants in 1974, Urban Development Action Grants in 1977, Enterprise Zones in 1980, and Empowerment Zones in 1993. This article, written in 1996, concluded that after all of these programs, there's no evidence that any government program made any improvement in any urban community anywhere.
Prior to the Civil Rights Movement, you had poverty, but you did not have the social pathology. You didn't have lots of drug use and abuse. You didn't have a lot of mothers having children out of the context of marriage.
Prior to the 1960s, the black community, even though we had no political rights, didn't have voting rights, were not represented in local government, and some of us being lynched every day, even in the presence of all those economic and social injustices, the black marriage rate in 1930 to 1940 was higher than in the white community. 82% of all black families had a man and a woman raising children. But what happened in 1960, when government intervened with the poverty programs, a major paradigm shift occurred and contributed to the decimation of the family, because welfare policy said if you drop out of school, don't work, have babies, the government will pay you, and the more children you have, the more we'll pay you.
The problem with the war on poverty is it cuckolded the man by the welfare state. The father's role, beyond just insemination, became absorbed by bureaucracy, by the welfare state. And as a result, Men were estranged from these circles of giving and responsibility with long-term horizons toward the future, and pushed out into the street, where he often preys on society rather than supports it. The welfare state usurps his critical role in the family, and thus renders the man dispensable. And he responds by attacking the society.
Work and labor ennoble people and give people dignity, give them a sense of value, accomplishment, achievement, and that adds to who people are as human persons created in the image of God. And often what governments do is they rob from people that sense of personal work, responsibility and dignity and value.
A lot of people who are living and working among the poor tend to think about how the poor have been oppressed. And those are things that are important to look at. Period, they're important. There's another side. There are reasons for poverty that I'd say they're counterintuitive or they're just hidden and they're not things that you would think of. There are times when poverty is actually the result of a stupid decision at a bureaucratic level and not the result of the white man or somebody else trying to hurt somebody.